All right, in this segment, we're going to talk about how to look smart at a concert. I know this is a thing that novice listeners have a problem with all the time. They go to a concert, they don't know how to behave, they don't know what the performers are doing, they just don't know what to do. So we're going to try to alleviate some of your anxiety about that. So let's start by what happens when you get to the concert. We'll start with a symphony concert because that's big, lots of people, lots of things that go on they're special. So we're going to watch a little video here. So this is what it looks like from the performer's side. You'd be out in the audience. You see there are musicians just moving around. Backstage, we have the conductor, we have a stage manager. We now see that the musicians have stopped making noise. And this gentleman comes out. This is the concert master. He's the first violinist. He always comes out first. He will acknowledge the applause for the audience. And then he will turn around and tune the orchestra, which we're not going to see here, but that's normally what would happen. The next person that comes out is the conductor. And you see that even the people backstage start applauding, so the audience knows to applaud. So just follow their cues, they will help you with that. So that's what it would be like at a symphony concert. Concertmaster, conductor, and then off they go. One of the other things that would happen at a symphony concert is that they would need to tune, and you would see that also in some smaller concerts. So let's see what that sounds like. If you've ever been to a concert, you recognize this sound. Random A-ness, we would call it. It's the note A, it's what we all tune to. And you see that that was pretty quick. Some orchestras, you would get multiple A's. The brass will tune, the violins would tune, the woodwinds would tune, and then everybody would be ready, and then the conductor will come out to start the program. Now, what if it's a small kind of recital, not a big orchestra? This is one of the times that students really get confused because some sort of odd things happen. So here's the beginning of a vocal recital. And we see that we have our singer come out and her accompanist, and they're both going to graciously accept your applause. Then the pianist sits down and the singer is ready. And that's really all there is to a concert like that. They don't need to tune. They've already done all of that. If it were an instrumentalist, they might tune to the piano if they didn't do it before they came out the first time. So that's for the opening setting. Now you know, when they come out, everybody applauds, even though they haven't done anything yet. But if you think about it, when you go to a rock concert or whatever your favorite kind of music is, you do the same thing. When your group comes out, you cheer madly. We just don't cheer quite as madly in the art music world. So we now have this lovely singer here on the stage, and she's performing, and she's going to sing probably one or two numbers before she takes a break, and then she's going to leave the stage. And that often confuses audience members who haven't been to this kind of concert. Why is she leaving? She's just sung like for 5 minutes. What's the problem? The thing is that usually a concert is broken into little segments. So she might have done music from a particular period first. And so she's leaving the stage, and she would be sort of regrouping her brain because when she comes back, it's going to be a different kind of music. It also gives her a chance to get some water, take a breath, sort of reset herself. You will see that in all sorts of recitals that have small groups or individuals. You don't see that in an orchestra concert. They're not all going to leave the stage between numbers and get something to drink. So that's what happens when they leave. Another thing that sometimes freaks out people who haven't been to small concerts is brass players who have to pour the water out of their instruments. People think that's gross, but it's just a fact of life. It's not spit. People always talk about people pouring spit out of their horns, but it's not. It's condensation. We're blowing warm air into a metal tube, and it condenses. This is just physics. And we have to get it out of there, or you get a sound that goes while you're trying to play. So they do have to periodically dump the water out of their horns. Nothing disgusting about it, but it's just a fact of life for brass players, so don't think they're trying to make you ill. So what about the clothes? When you go to an orchestra concert, everybody wears black. And students think that's kind of odd sometimes. And why does everybody wear black? Think about it like a sports team. On a sports team, everybody wears the same uniform. Now, they do have numbers on their backs and their names and things like that, but it's a way of telling that we're all as a unit. In an orchestra or another big ensemble, it's about the ensemble. It's not about individuals. We don't put our names on the backs of our clothes, obviously, but it gives a consistent look to the group, and it makes you know that this is a group effort. This is not a solo venture. Compare that to the lady that we saw. She's got this striking red dress, very flashy. She's a soloist. She gets to do that. So when you have a solo singer in particular, they're very good about wearing fancy dresses. They're probably going to get colorful. Everybody else is pretty much going to wear black, but it's because we want you to focus on the music, not on what the performer is wearing. I will tell you, I saw a piano recital recently where the pianist had 4 or 5 inch heels on, and I spent half the time trying to figure out how they played the piano with those shoes on. That's distracting if you're trying to really listen to the music. So we try not to distract you. Now, in a symphony concert, you might see people, not the entire orchestra, but certain people who leave after a particular piece is finished. That happens because the next piece on the program is something they don't play. As we will learn when we look at different kinds of compositions, we'll know that not every instrument is used in every piece. So maybe we started out the concert with a big overture that took all sorts of players, but the next thing that the orchestra is going to play is an intimate Mozart serenade, which wouldn't require nearly as many brass players, probably no percussion. So all those people will leave rather than just sitting on the stage and looking like they don't have anything to do, which they don't. So they will leave the stage and then they would come back for any other numbers that they might play. Now, what if you go to the opera or to the ballet? Those are very different. And you will see that people behave differently in the audience for those as well. When you go to a symphony concert, you have to clap in the right place. And we're going to talk about when that right place is in just a minute. When you go to a solo recital, you have to clap in the right place. And that's another one of those things that makes people nervous. What if I clap in the wrong place? Well, you won't clap for very long because you'll be alone and then you'll stop and you won't do it anymore. But we're going to teach you how to do that correctly. But when you go to the opera or the ballet, you clap when you see something you enjoyed. The same thing applies in a jazz concert. Somebody's played a great solo, you don't have to wait till the piece is over, you cheer then. In the opera, they just sang this wonderful aria. When they finish, everybody applauds. And the actor will usually just stand there. They don't step out of character and go, oh, thank you. They just stay in character, wait for the applause to die down, and carry on with the story. But it's expected that you would applaud for this wonderful performance they just did. In ballet, they actually stop the action and they'll take their bows when you applaud for them. So things are different depending on what kind of event you go to. My best advice, find somebody who looks like they do this all the time. Do what they do. Pick out somebody who looks like they're a regular. They're not going to be looking at all their program and fiddling and trying to figure out what's going on. They're going to be very calm looking. Take your cue from that person. Now, let's look at a program itself. So we have on the screen for you a typical program for a concert. So we'll start with the symphony program. So we see that this program has an overture to Le Nozze di Figaro, which is just the marriage of Figaro in Italian. And it tells us K492, and it has the composer's name and his dates. These are things you would normally see on a concert program. The K tells us that this piece was the 492nd piece that Mozart wrote. He wasn't a very tidy kind of composer, and he never put anything on the piece to tell you when he did it. So somebody went back later, that's the person who the K stands for, and organized everything so we would know when pieces were written. Why do we care? As you'll see when we talk about different composers, you'll see that they wrote in different styles during their lifetime. So if we know it's from his late period, we would expect something different than, say, K32. It just helps us to know what to listen for. The next piece on our program would be the famous Beethoven Symphony No. 5, which the full title is Symphony No. 5 in C minor, Opus 67. OP stands for opus, which is the Latin word for work. Beethoven was a nice, organized guy. In fact, he was a little bit compulsive, and he made lots of scribbles on everything, so we have lots of records. So he indicated this was the 67th piece that he composed. So it's right there on the title for us. We know it's a symphony because it's in the title. We know it's his 5th symphony because that's in the title. And we even know that it's in the key of C minor, which is all useful information from an audience perspective. You'll learn more about that when we cover those things later. But then below that, you see 4 more titles. These are what we call movements. So in music, if you think about this whole piece, this symphony is a book. Books are broken into chapters. So these chapters, this book has 4 chapters. And we call those chapters movements. They're all connected together. So just like in a book, the story keeps going from chapter to chapter. in a piece that has multiple musical movements, the story keeps going from movement to movement. So we don't applaud in between those movements. The reason for that is oral. You need to be able to remember what you heard. And if you clap, it sort of muddies up your thinking, it muddies up what you've heard, and you don't remember the parts that you heard. So if you were listening very carefully to this Symphony No. 5, you would hear in some of the later movements bits of things that he did in the first movement. And if you've sort of fouled up your hearing, you won't remember that, and it's harder to make those connections between the piece. So when you have movements listed like that, don't applaud. Wait till the very end, and then you will be right on with that. I will talk more about what those titles mean later, but for now you just need to know how the structure is. Now let's look at a vocal recital. So we had our lovely lady in red here. We have a very short little recital here of what she might do. It starts with a piece by Handel, who is a composer from the late 1600s. And you see that in quotations it says, "Rejoice greatly." And then it says from Messiah, which is in italics. This is useful information for an audience member. If it's in quotations like that, that usually means it's a segment of something bigger. Singers don't usually do movements like orchestras do because the pieces don't work that way, although we do have one piece that functions like that. When you have something like this, something in quotes, and then it says from something else, in this case, Messiah, that tells us that this is one little piece from a bigger work. Messiah is actually about 3 hours long, so you'll be very happy that she's not singing all of it. She's just going to sing this one number from it. The next thing on the program is Ombre mai fu from another Handel work called Xerxes. Again, we have it in quotes. We have from something else. So if you happen to be doing a report for a class and they ask you the name of the piece, the big piece, that's going to be the part that it's from. So Messiah is the work, the big work. And Rejoice Greatly would be the movement. So if you have to identify things in that way for a class, that's the way you would tell. So we see that those two are grouped together. That's typical in a vocal recital. She would sing these two pieces by the same composer, or they might even be by two different composers, but from the same time period. And then she would leave the stage, as we said, regroup, get her head on straight for the next thing. And then she's coming back and she's singing Mozart, which is very different in style from Handel, so she has to make a mental adjustment. So again, we've got a couple of pieces from something bigger. In this case, The Marriage of Figaro and The Magic Flute. So she would sing those again, leave, come back, and now she's doing a massive work. She's doing Gustav Mahler's Kindertotenlieder, which means songs on the death of children. Very cheery topic. And obviously you'd want to get your head in that frame. You know, if you're going to come back and sing about children who are dying or dead, you need a mental adjustment from whatever cheerful stuff might have come out of the previous set. So here we have Kindertotenlieder. Notice that that's in italics. That means it's a big work. The bigger it is, we put in italics. Again, referring to our book reference, the title of a book in a citation, usually in italics. The title of the chapter, usually in quotes. So that's a way that you can make that connection. And we see that this has 5 movements. And if you had the full program, you would have translations, so you would know what she was actually singing about. But again, you would wait till she finished that last movement before you applauded. And probably in this case cried, because this is about dying children, so it's a very sad piece. So that's a typical vocal program. Now let's look at this typical piano recital. Again, you see that the pieces are grouped in little bunches. And you'll notice that it's kind of a chronological order. So the pianist usually will start with something early, in this case Bach. And you see that Bach doesn't have opus number or K number. It has a BWV number. And that's an abbreviation for a very long German word, which I won't even try to pronounce, but basically it says this is one of Bach's works. So if you remember BW for Bach's works, you'll be okay with that. And you see that this is the 535th thing that Bach wrote. He wrote thousands of pieces. His numbers are very large. So they would do the Bach, and then, like the singer, leave the stage because they're changing style, coming back to do something different. So when this pianist comes back, they're going to play a Haydn piano sonata. So that's right here in our title, Piano Sonata, which tells us this is a piano by itself, and in fact, all of these would be. This is the 52nd piano sonata that Haydn wrote. He liked those. He wrote lots of them. It's in the key of E flat major. And then we have an HOB number, which stands for Hoboken, and it doesn't mean the town in New Jersey. So again, it's a person who organized his music into sections. So that number tells us again where this fits into Haydn's set of works. Again, we've got 3 movements, so we're going to wait till the end to applaud. Performer leaves, comes back. Now we're doing Chopin, which is a Romantic period composer. And you see that this performer is going to do 3 ballades by Chopin. These are actually freestanding pieces. He could come back, he or she could do just one. But it's pretty typical to do multiple pieces of the same type. So you'll see that there are 3 of those ballades on the program. And it tells us which ballade, it tells us what key, gives us an opus number. And you can see that he didn't write them all at the same time, so that can be useful information as well. But again, we would wait till they're all done to applaud. Anytime they're grouped like that, that's a signal that you should just wait. And the performer's not going to get up to say thank you in the middle either. So if the performer doesn't get up from the piano or turn to you and go, then you know it's time not to applaud. Then this performer would leave and come back again and finish this program up with a set of pieces by Shostakovich, who is a modern composer, again with lots of movements. So as you're listening, sometimes it's easy to follow because if you know the terminology, like when you learn what allegro and andante and all those terms mean, you'll know that those are tempos and you can tell, oh, that's a fast one, that's a slow one. But a one like this with a title like Hurdy-Gurdy, what does that sound like? We don't know, but hopefully you'll know when they get to that movement and you can say, oh, I get how that sounds like a hurdy-gurdy. So the titles will sometimes be helpful, sometimes not so much. So that's how you would get through a program. Those are useful pieces of information for you. Now you know when to applaud. You know how to read the program. One last thing is you need to learn how to talk at intermission. I always say that one of the important things about knowing this kind of information is that you can go to parties at your job and talk about something besides work. Because who wants to talk about work all the time? You can really impress people if you can talk about something else. So you can say, oh, I went to see the symphony last night. And, they played this great piece of music by Mozart. And people will go, ooh, listen to that. Look how smart this person is. But if you go and go, I went to the symphony last night and they played this song by Mozart. They're going to go, really? Mozart? There's your first error. You didn't know how to pronounce the composer's name. The second thing is, if nobody sang, it's not a song. It's a really bad habit people have. If it's a piece of music with no words, don't call it a song. Songs have words. Call it a piece. Call it a work. Call it a symphony. Call it what it was. Just don't call it a song. That's one way of really showing people that you don't know what you're talking about. The other thing that I hear people say a lot is, I didn't like the singer, but I liked the music. Well, the singer is the music. You can't have the music without the singer. And singers get really annoyed when you act like they're not part of the process. Like the singer is some special thing on the side. When you mean the instruments, talk about the instruments. Wasn't really impressed with the singer, but I really liked the instrumental accompaniment. I liked the orchestra. I liked the ensemble, not the music. Together they are the music. The instruments are their part, the singer's their part. So that's another thing you can do to avoid making yourself look like you didn't know what you're talking about. And that's our whole point in this particular segment, to make you look smart when you go to a concert.